Classic Country, 100.1 WGLC. It's Music and Stuff. Joining me right now on the phone, Bob Jornlin. Good morning, Bob.
Good morning, Charles.
So you've had quite an adventure. Now, on April 20th, you spoke at the Rochelle meeting about the Great Lakes Basin Railroad, and you had an event happen to you.
Yes, I did. I got overly excited, I guess. This Great Lakes Railroad project has really got me upset, as it's going to be going right by our farm, and it seems like they think they can just draw a line in the dirt and put in a railroad, and they don't understand all the valuable soil that they're going to take out of production forever, and all the homes and farms they're going to basically destroy in value. And so I was pretty excited about that, and yes, they said it wasn't a heart attack, it was just that the heart stopped, and I'm not sure about the difference there, but I was fortunate to have the right people there that give me artificial respiration, and then they got a defibrillator in the school there, so they got that hooked up and shocked me. And when you get in the helicopter to go to Rockford, and the pilot turns around and says, "You again, Bob? You know you've maybe been in that situation too many times." So.
Well, glad to hear you're doing better, Bob. We'll have more conversation with Bob Jornlin coming up after this. It's Classic Country, 100.1 WGLC. Classic Country, 100.1 WGLC. Good morning, Music and Stuff. Joining me on the phone, Bob Jornlin, farmer from Earlville, who had a scare at the Great Lakes Basin meeting health-wise, but he's doing better. Of course, you may know him from the LST 325.
We went to the island of Crete, which is a Greek island in the Med. And because when I was in the Navy back in the early 60s, I had put a landing ship tank, an LST, which, by the way, were a lot of them made at Seneca, Illinois.
Now, for those who aren't familiar with what an LST is, what exactly is a landing ship tank?
Well, it was kind of the dream of Winston Churchill when he got pushed off of Dunkirk in 1940 by the Germans. He had to leave all his equipment on the beach. Had a hard time getting his men off. They didn't have a ship that could go up on the beach and offload heavy equipment, or he brought that idea to the United States, and a guy by the name of John Niedermeyer, who was a submarine designer, in about 15 minutes drew this out on a napkin, and surprisingly enough, it's pretty much was not changed from the napkin drawing, except they enlarged the doors in the bow to take the Sherman tank. It would hold 20 Sherman tanks in the tank deck, and it would hold 40 loaded trucks on the main deck. It was 328 feet long, 50 feet wide, and 18 feet from the water to the main deck, 53 feet up to the top of the con.
Certainly not a small boat, that's for sure. Got more with Bob Jornlin coming up after this. Take a short break here on Music and Stuff. It's Classic Country, 100.1 WGLC. Classic Country, 100.1 WGLC. Good morning, Music and Stuff, brought to you by Eureka Savings Bank. Joining me, Bob Jornlin on the phone, and Bob talking about the LST landing ship tank. Now, how did you get involved with the restoration and sailing of that ship?
I'd helped put one back in commission out of the mothballs, and I had these World War II guys mostly that wanted one back for a museum. They'd been through a lot of problems with our State Department and fought a lot of battles to get this ship finally through Congress and given to us by Congress. But it had to go to Greece to get it. Somewhere down the line I opened my mouth and said, well, I'd put one of them back in commission when I was in the Navy. Of course, that was 35 years before. And well, as it turned out, I was supposed to be executive officer, but then they had a mutiny and threw the first captain off, and as executive officer, I moved into the captain's cabin, and a very talented bunch of guys, and they were going to bring this ship back no matter what. And they didn't care if I got put in jail or whatever. If they had to get out in front and pull it in with a rope in their teeth, they were going to bring it back. And
how long did it take from first arriving in Greece and seeing the condition of the boat to when it actually was able to move under its own power?
Well, the first group got there with the first captain in July of 2000. I didn't get over there till September 1st, and then nothing had been done, absolutely nothing, and they hadn't started the main engines, or we didn't have batteries to start them, we didn't have fuel aboard, but we wanted one to run because if you just set it in one spot, we didn't think it would be self-sufficient enough with people come and see a ship, a museum ship, and they don't come back every year to see it again. So we went to work and kind of had to start out, with the most important things, with the main engines. If they didn't run, we'd go home, and you kind of work your way up the ladder and these guys got it running.
Which is amazing, bringing something like that back to life. More conversation with Bob Jornlin coming up after this. It's Music and Stuff on Classic Country 100.1 WGLC. Classic Country 100.1 WGLC. Good morning, Music and Stuff, brought to you by Eureka Savings Bank. I'm Charles. On the phone joining me, Bob Jornlin, talking about the landing ship tank 325 that they sailed home from Europe. Now, you guys had some paperwork issues because you were trying to sail a military warship home without any paperwork or a flag.
But we tried to leave without the paperwork one Sunday morning, and that shook up the Greeks. So they promised me the paperwork if I didn't leave, and I was glad to promise them I wouldn't leave if they'd give me the paperwork, which they did. And then we sailed it across the Med. BP Oil, by the way, gave us 50,000 gallons of diesel, and they made that decision in a week, but they thought this was worthy enough to donate the fuel. And so we had repairs. We had to get into Gibraltar. We ran a couple of storms. And it took 29 days from Gibraltar across the Atlantic. We stopped in Nassau to get more fuel or oil. We ran out of lube oil. But we made it into Mobile, Alabama. We actually arrived an hour early. I had to slow up. Anyway, we got a lot of publicity out of that, and I give a lot of talks, and people, after every talk, a couple of people come up and always say, you ought to write a book on that story. And I said, well, I'm not a book writer, and so I went along for 10 years without getting too serious about it until a guy wanted to do a movie, and he needed a book to base it on. So took 2 years. Book turned out better than I expected it to. Everybody seems to like it. Titled it Bringing Back a Hero. I maybe should have named it Bringing Home a Hero.
Certainly a historic piece of history, that's for sure. We'll have more conversation with Bob Jornlin here on Music and Stuff, brought to you by Eureka Savings Bank on Classic Country 100.1 WGLC. Classic Country 100.1 WGLC. It's Music and Stuff. I'm Charles, brought to you this morning by Eureka Savings Bank. On the phone, joining me from Earlville, Bob Jornlin. We're talking about the LST 325. Of course, he helped restore the vessel. It's got more of a local connection than just you. Isn't that right, Bob?
Seneca made 157 of them, and they did it in about 3 years. Kind of tried to be kept secret. They didn't want the Germans to know that they had ships that could go right onto the beach and offload tanks right on the sand. Stern anchor, and you dropped that 600 feet off the shore, and you kind of went in at high tide, and you got offloaded. You were lighter with the load off, and then you could pull on the anchor, stern anchor, and back your engines, and the old girls would come back in the ocean, and they always loaded wounded soldiers right in through the bow doors also. And LSTs saved a lot of men. They had 3 emergency operating rooms on there and 3 doctors, but they took them right back to England, and I could say the most serious ones they operated on right on the ship, and saved a lot of lives. But they went back and got another load, not always tanks. They had to get gasoline for Patton's tanks after they got them off and keep him going, which they did. And of course they brought in food and other supplies to keep the Army fortified with ammunition and kept them on the move. And that's how we took the islands in the Pacific, and how we pushed Hitler back to Berlin. And the LST was, we say, is a ship that won the war. Of course, I get a little flack from the aircraft people and and the big cruisers, but they couldn't put anything on the shore where the LST could.
Now, the LST 325 is the ship that you went to Greece, got it running, and it's still being restored, and it's currently in Evansville, Indiana. Coming up, we're going to talk about what role the LST had, specifically the LST 325 had, during World War II. It's music and stuff. I'm Charles. It's Classic Country 100.1 WGLC. Classic Country 100.1 WGLC. It's music and stuff. Brought to you by Eureka Savings Bank, streaming worldwide. Get the app for your smartphone or tablet today. Check it out at WGLC.net. Talking with Bob Jornlin on the phone about landing ship tanks and the ship that he helped restore. Now, what role did LST 325 have in World War II?
Well, as I say, we're bringing back a hero. It was one of the first ones made, came out of the Philadelphia shipyard. They only made 13 there. One Seneca in Evansville, Indiana, and 2 shipyards in Pittsburgh got going. They went back and were building destroyers and other ships there on the coast. It was over there and got into the invasion of Sicily, which was actually one of the first invasions with the new ship. Sicily was a pretty hot invasion, and 325 had Patton's tanks and officers on board. We're not sure how Patton got there. He probably walked across the water, but they didn't make just one trip. It went in and unloaded and went back and got more stuff, and so it made about 15 trips across the Med there for Sicily, and then it also went into Salerno in that invasion, and then it went to England and got ready for the D-Day invasion at Normandy on June 6, 1944.
And we'll have more about the LST 325 and what dangers it faced leading up to and during the D-Day invasion. It's music and stuff. I'm Charles, talking with Bob Jornlin. We'll be back in a few minutes here on Classic Country 100.1 WGLC. It's Classic Country 100.1 WGLC. Good morning. It's music and stuff. On the phone joining me this morning is Bob Jornlin. We're talking about the LST 325, a landing ship tank, which is a landing vehicle that they use to put machinery on the beach on D-Day, including tanks and trucks and people. So, Bob, we're talking about D-Day and the invasion of, Germany's fortress in Europe. What role did the LST 325 have?
A thing called Exercise Tiger, which was a practice for that invasion. That was in late April of 44. German U-boats happened to come along, and they sunk 3 of the LSTs, and we'd lost our 2 destroyers that were supposed to be guarding us, English destroyers, and one went back for repairs, and they had a mix-up with the radios. They weren't on the same frequency and a whole bunch of things. But the LST took on the German U-boats, actually chased them away because they had 20 millimeters, were pretty good anti-aircraft guns, but they were also very effective against a boat in the water because they had tracers, and they could just stick the tracer on the U-boat and give it all kinds of flak, so.
Wow, and that was just in the days leading up into the invasion. So what happened when it came time to land on the shores of France?
It went into D-Day on June 6th, made the landing on June 7th, and made 43 trips and back across the English Channel with wounded soldiers. It rescued 800 Australians out of the water when their ship was hit by a torpedo. Sub could have been around and taken the 325, but the captain stopped and picked up the Australians. You don't last long in that cold water. Fortunately, the sub had went on to greener pastures. And then it pulled an LST back that had been torpedoed in the stern back to England. And so it had quite a career. It actually was operated for 10 years, putting radar units up in Iceland and Greenland from 1950 to 1960. And then in 1964, we loaned it to the Greek Navy, and they had it for 35 years. So it certainly had a lot of miles on it, and it's in its 4th life is what I tell everybody.
And we'll have more about the 4th life of the LST and how you can see the ship coming up in our conversation with Bob Jornlin. Good morning. It's music and stuff here on Classic Country 100.1 WGLC. Classic Country, 100.1 WGLC. It's Music and Stuff brought to you by Eureka Savings Bank. Joining me this morning, it's Bob Jornlin, and we're talking about the LST 325. For information about the boat, you can go to the website, lstmemorial.org. And any plans this summer for the boat?
Yes, they're going towards the end of September and going to Cape Girardeau, south of St. Louis, for 6 days, and then they're going to go on down to Vicksburg, Mississippi after that. They'll be in there from probably about the 5th of October till the 11th or something. And they've cut it down to two cities on a trip, but we have volunteers, as you know, that operate the ship, and we were... The longest we ever been gone was in 2003. We went to 9 cities and took 78 days, and we were all ready to kill each other. But we needed money, and we made pretty near $80,000 on that 2003, which got the ship fixed up to run better and painted and a whole bunch of things, but spent another $1 million on it here about 3 years ago. Went down to Port Arthur, Texas, to a shipyard. You wouldn't know it if you saw it when we brought it back from Greece. You went aboard today because it's basically totally restored. Even the engines have been overhauled and fixed. And it's pretty much just like it was in World War II. It has all the guns and everything that was on it, all the tie-down chains. That you had to tie everything down and on the ship because it was flat bottom, and you had to it would roll. Anyway, it's quite a ship to see, and it's only $10 for adults and $5 for kids. And we give a guided tour, so in Evansville, and when we take it out and we go to cities, we have so many people. We have up to 20,000 come aboard in 6 days. So we walk them through, and we have people throughout the ship that they can talk to and ask questions. We got quite a few displays in the tank deck now, and really nice to see, actually. It's people stand in line for an hour and spend an hour going through the ship, and they come off and thank us for bringing the ship to their town. And
it's kind of nice to hear a story about something that helped win the war, but that nobody was really looking after. And how many of these LSTs are actually left?
Well, there's some in some foreign countries. I don't know how many are actually running. We don't have anything running in the United States. We have another ship up in Muskegon, Michigan. That was a car ferry, and they've been trying to bring it back, but it's stationary. It will probably never run. Otherwise, that's it. In fact, the LST is the only Navy museum ship that actually runs and goes places, and that makes a big difference too. It don't have that musty smell you have in the other. You go aboard the battleships and that, and you can tell it's been locked up and tied up for a long time. You got a little diesel smell in ours, it runs.
It's being used. Well, I hope you get a chance to get back on the ship, Bob. It's currently in Evansville, Indiana, where the museum and the ship is parked in the off-season. So great to hear from you, Bob. Your book is available on Amazon, Bringing Back a Hero by Bob Jornlin. Check it out, and if you get a chance to go to Evansville, Indiana, check out the LST Memorial. Thank you for joining me this morning, Bob.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's been my pleasure, and I can talk about the ship for hours. And,
we'll have to get you on again sometime soon. It's Music and Stuff. Classic Country, 100.1 WGLC.